Good evening once again, and welcome to our latest webinar in the Leading for School Improvement webinar series. Leading for School Improvement specializes in helping schools and districts explore how EL-centered strategic and collaborative leadership can transform your school or district into a teacher-led improvement engine that creates equitable conditions for all students to thrive. Our just-in-time topic for this evening is a school leader's post-COVID checklist to close opportunity gaps for English learners.
All right.
I'm Dr. Karen Woodson, the founder of Leading for School Improvement, or LSI for short. I'm looking forward to using my experiences in leadership to support schools and districts to improve academic outcomes for English learners as we recover from COVID-19. I'm also very pleased to introduce my partner in this EL-centered leadership journey, Dr. Andrea Thompson. Dr. Thompson.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Woodson. So, of course, I'm the founder of Parents as Tutors, and you'll get that information. That's a company that helps parents to help their children learn to read and read to learn. I'm also a school administrator and university professor. And of course, I work with the NAESP. I was their National Outstanding Assistant Principal for the state of Maryland. We understand what it is that you are going through. We know what it is you went through when you had to shift during COVID and also support your English language learners. So this whole presentation is just for you. Go ahead, change it, Karen. Okay, so a few webinar norms. You can use the question and answer window at the bottom of your screen if you have questions, and we're going to pause at certain points and answer questions. And also, we will be having a poll and a chat. So we look forward to your participation. So here's what we will be presenting today. We have 3 outcomes, and they are embedded with so much information. First, we're going to talk about those opportunity gaps that are unique to English learners that occurred during the COVID-related adjustments, because you had to adjust your school's ELD model in order to make sure you accommodate your ELs. So we'll talk about the resulting learning gaps that happened because you adjusted your models. Then we're going to talk about the checklist that needs to be followed as you readjust in terms of the systems, structures, processes, all in going back to an equitable collaborative approach that involves the teachers and families, all in closing the opportunity gaps. Okay, so here it is. We know that before COVID, you were already dealing with all the varied needs of your English learners. And you were focusing on putting all the right conditions in place to address them, whether they're gifted, they had varying language proficiency levels. And of course, someone talked about that dually identified ones, those who newly arrived to the US, interrupted schooling, all of those, higher probability of failure. You were dealing with all of this pre-COVID. Then you had to adjust the condition. Coherence may not have been there. It's a struggle for many during COVID. So we just want to let you know we feel your pain. And now we're going to talk about how to bring it back post-COVID. Let's reflect, because we're going to walk you through the different models just so you could just refresh your memory on them. And I want you to think about this, because we're going to ask you in a poll to talk to us about the different models and the class types you had, and then also about the adjustments that you had to make. So the different models and approaches around ESL, ELD, sheltered programs, newcomer programs, bilingual programs. So Karen, could you take us through, please?
I believe I can, and I'm going to try to find my pointer, which I may not be able to do. So I'm just going to ask everyone to follow along as I talk a little bit about these ESL, ELD, and shelter programs. I want to begin with that one first. Now, many of you here use ESL, ELD, and or sheltered programs in the content areas in your school. These programs can be implemented in a pull-out, push-in, or on a self-contained basis, as you know. Now, the language goals of these program models do differ in that the goal of ESL, ELD programs is English proficiency with some focus on academic English. The goal of content-based ESL and sheltered instruction in the content areas is academic English language proficiency. Now, insofar as our academic goals are concerned, all three program models have the same goals as are there for all students. So we do not have any differentiated goals in the academics for students who are accessing these kinds of program models. The language used for instruction in these program models is English. However, other languages can be used, as you know, to clarify and support students as needed. And as you know, technology has really changed the game in this area, giving teachers access to hundreds of languages to support students. Now, English learners who access these kinds of programs have a range of English language proficiency levels, from those who have limited to no English at all to those who are at the intermediate and advanced levels of English proficiency. ELs who access these programs have a variety of linguistic and cultural backgrounds, as you know. However, in the sheltered instruction model, it is possible to have self-contained classes that include native English speakers. The average length of time for ELs participating in these kinds of programs before they actually attain proficiency in English does vary. It can be from 1 to 5 years in our ESL and ELD programs. And then if we're running sheltered instruction in the content areas, the length of time is a little shorter, typically 1 to 3 years. Some of you are implementing programs for newcomer English learners, that is, students who have arrived to the United States within the past year. These programs offer content-based ESL, as well as instruction in basic literacy, sheltered instruction, and or native language content instruction. Newcomer programs are self-contained. The language goal of newcomer programs is to get students at an advanced beginner level in English. Some newcomer programs also offer native language development support. I'm just going to say that one more time. The language goal of a newcomer program is just to get the students to the advanced beginner level in English. It is not a forever placement by any stretch. It's really important that we set good metrics to understand who qualifies for a newcomer program, as well as when students must exit or leave that newcomer program. The academic goals for newcomer programs will vary according to the design of the program. So these goals will most likely differ from the academic goals that are in place for all students, which of course is why we want to make sure that this is a very short-term option for students until they build enough proficiency and, again, at the advanced beginner level, high beginner level, in order to exit into the regular ELD program. The language used for instruction in newcomer programs is English and or the native language in the content areas for collaboration and support. English learners who access newcomer programs have limited to no English and low literacy levels in their native languages. They are recently arrived to the US and may enroll with limited or interrupted formal education. Newcomers have, as you know, a variety of linguistic and cultural backgrounds. Insofar as the average time students stay in the program, it's about 1 to 3 semesters. Again, emphasizing the point that this is a very temporary placement, okay? So students will exit relatively quickly. Some of you gathered here implement bilingual programs, which can be defined as 3 types: transitional bilingual, dual language or two-way immersion, and bilingual content areas. Now, in the transitional bilingual program, ELs receive ESL and all content instruction areas in the native language of the students. This is a self-contained program, and ELs can exit early or late depending on the goals for language learning. In dual language or two-way immersion, students receive instruction in all subjects in both languages. Now, if non-native students are enrolled, sheltered instruction in either language can be provided. In bilingual content areas, which typically occurs in middle and high school, ELs can access some of the core content areas in their native language. All 3 of these bilingual program types are self-contained. Let's take a look at how language goals differ in the bilingual program models. Now, in the transitional program, as the name suggests, the goal is to transition to all English instruction. The native language will be developed in a limited way if the program is an early exit program. There will be more native language development if the program is a late exit program. In the dual language or two-way immersion model, the language goal is bilingualism in the target language and in English. Lastly, in the bilingual content areas, the goal is limited first language development with the exception of native language arts courses if available. Academic goals for each of these bilingual program types are the same as for all students, so there are no differing outcomes for students. The languages used for instruction are as follows. For transitional bilingual programs, the student's native language in content areas and English. For dual language two-way immersion programs, it's the target language in English for the content areas. Now, it's possible that the program could begin, let's say, with 90% of the instruction in the native language, and then incrementally taper down to 50% in each language. Or the program could be 50% for each language for the duration of the entire program. Last and certainly not least, in the bilingual content areas, the language of instruction is the native language. So, what are the student characteristics for each program? In the transitional bilingual, all students have the same native language. Students have limited to no English. In the dual language or two-way immersion program, there are language majority students, typically the English speakers, and language minority students, which are speakers of the target language, who are typically limited in English. Now, some dual language programs enroll students who share the same native language, and others enroll students who speak languages other than the target language or English. So dual language programs offers a tremendous amount of flexibility, but also a tremendous amount of responsibility, because you can either be dealing with 2 languages or more than 2, depending on program design. In the bilingual content areas, ELs have limited to no English and share the same native language. Okay. In each of the 3 bilingual program models, it's highly likely that students have a variety of cultural backgrounds. And as you can see here, the length of time students spend in bilingual programs varies from 1 to 2 years for early exit transitional programs to as many as 8 to 12 years for dual language or two-way immersion programs.
Okay, so now that you've gotten that brief overview of the different program approaches, program model approaches, and the various class types, I want you to really think about what program model approach was I using pre-COVID? What class type? So let's do a poll.
So I've launched a poll. It's an anonymous poll, and we are asking you to indicate your responses to 2 questions. As Dr. Thompson said, number 1 is, which EL program model approach best describes your context prior to COVID-19? You would select one of those, the one that best describes, and then be sure to scroll in your window for the second question. Which class type is most common in your setting? And as of right now, about 51% have voted. We're going to take it up to hopefully 100%. So once again, please participate in the polls because they're going to help us learn from each other. Very good. We're getting higher and higher. We are at about 88% now. I'm going to give it a few more seconds before we end the poll and show those results. Responses coming in, we are at 90%, 90, just waiting for a couple of more attendees.
Emily, I hope Emily was able to submit.
Yes, please make sure you hit the submit button. I'll be ending the poll in a few more seconds. And we're ending in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're going to end that poll. We've gotten into the 90s. I was hoping for 100%, but we'll be okay with the 90s. Okay, here we go. Let's see what we have. So here are our results. Regarding question 1, which EL program model best describes your context prior to COVID-19? Dr. Thompson, are you able to see those results?
No, we're not, but we trust you.
Okay, so with this answer, 56% of us are using an ESL or ELD model. Okay, that's the most common type, ESL or ELD. 35% are using content-based ESL. 21% are using sheltered instruction in the content areas. 15% use a Newcomer program. 6% use transitional bilingual. And 9% are using dual language two-way. We don't have anyone using what we call the bilingual content areas. So in this particular result, 56%, more than half of us are using an ESL/ELD approach. And then the next highest would be content-based ESL.
Right. Emily could have put hers in the chat because Emily wasn't able to submit.
Okay.
So now we know. Now we know.
So let's go to the second question, which is which class type is the most common? And I'm wondering how many of you can probably guess what it is. And I'm going to guess many of you are saying probably pull out. Actually, no. Pull out and plug in came in as the number one. So most of us, 35% of us, are using the pull out and plug in approach, a mix of the two.
Yes.
The next highest amount would be pull out only, 34%. We have 15% doing plug in only. And then we have a 15% doing pull out, plug in, and self-contained. The smallest amount, 9%, do self-contained. So the big winner in this one is pull out and plug in. And then the runner-up would be pull out. Oh, let's see now.
Oh, there it is.
Oh.
Now we can see it.
It helps when the presenter shares the results. So I'll go ahead and let everyone take a look. I've read them. So those who are getting the recording afterwards can actually understand what you guys can see. But attendees, if you are taking a look, and you can probably scroll in the window to see all of the results.
Yes.
Okay.
Transitional, bilingual, dual language, sheltered instruction, content-based. A lot of you are. Yep. Pull out.
Thompson, do you see a download button there?
No, it just says close.
Okay, that's fine. So I am going, it says download for me. So I'm going to see what happened. I hope it doesn't, hopefully it doesn't shut off my computer.
Don't worry. Okay. So here's the thing. So we had to take you back. We had to take you back to think about what program, because by now with the on ground and then the virtual and the back and forth, I wonder how we even remember what program we were using, what approaches we were using, or even class type, when you have to share a room online with a general ed teacher. So here's the thing. I want you to think about the adjustment that you had to make. So take us to that next slide, Dr. Woodson.
Oh, certainly. Sorry, a little trouble here with the slides. There we go.
Okay, so share in the chat, what adjustments did you make to your EL program, the model or the approach during COVID? What adjustments? Let's share. Remember to do panelists and attendees.
So you're talking about, Doc, when we had that 24 hours to close out school when COVID hit?
Yeah.
And obviously there were adjustments made at the end of last year, as well as the ever growing list of adjustments that that's continuing to be made. So we want to,
Patricia laughing.
We want to hear, let's see what's happening in the chat now.
Yeah, talk about those adjustments you had to make in the chat. All right, so Michelle said, at my school, ESOL teachers provided ESOL service in the breakout rooms. We were assigned to specific grade level teachers. Yes. Yes, that was something I really went for. At first, we tried to provide asynchronous lessons and activities. I'm afraid to ask what happened next. Some students
try
or group. During COVID, we are allowed to only do pull-out as they do not want multiple staff going in. Wow. More pulling out. Oh, digitize all my lessons plans. Lots of video recording for instruction. Ooh, double work. Yes, it was.
Wow.
distance learning platforms, changing everything to e-learning almost. Okay. It was new, so there were many changes. Wow. We set up an ELL hub so that our level 1 and 2 ELs could still attend with the ESOL teachers. We had to make contact with parents who could not understand communication. Wow.
Yeah.
Challenges with getting students online, providing packets. Ooh, I'm so happy it's Teacher Appreciation Week. I'm just hoping you're really feeling appreciated right now. Let me share, say she's still contacting parents. ESOL students receive all of their service minutes virtually, at least those who attended. We had many. Okay. Yes.
Did you see the one where Lupe is
Mixed
sharing?
groups of ESOL teachers. ESOL. Ooh.
They set up an ELL hub so that our level 1 and 2 ELLs could still attend face-to-face with the ESOL teachers, and the levels 3 and 4 were serviced virtually with ESOL
Yes.
pushing into the virtual classrooms. So some thinking around different levels.
And you know that you can copy the chat. Like I think you can right click and select all and copy. So you can copy the chat so that you can copy and paste it in a Word document. So you can have time to go back through what all your colleagues had to do. We provided asynchronous activities, which very few students completed. Ooh, and we provide very few students completed it. And we are providing services within the classroom. Okay. Wow. We the testing phased out. Wow. Stephanie, we had to purchase a program to add to our curriculum so that students could access the activities at home and be provided with a prescriptive diagnostic curriculum to learn English. You know, it's good to get these ideas because you know what? You never know what's going to happen again. And we might be able to say that, hey, and here are some suggestions. You know, so it's good for you to right click, select all, copy it, paste it in Word. Wow. All right. So,
Wow.
on the asynchronous. Okay. All right. So let's move into the next slide.
Now, Doc, there's one that I'm picking up on that I just want to share because it's going to come up later. So, like I see, for example, one of our teachers, Shayna Kim, said that they only focused on the RELA content area insofar as building proficiency in English, and we know that the students have to learn the academic language in other content areas as well. So it kind of took them back a little bit, as we would expect.
I'm wondering how that's going to impact the other subject area scores if they're doing Park or another. Ooh. Okay.
We shall see.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Wow. Okay, are you ready, Doc, for the next one?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right.
What I just saw is the arrow on the left. I know you felt it. Yes. You felt as though you were all over the place with random acts of improvement. You were all over the place. And this is why post-COVID, you're trying to come back and trying to line up with those arrows on the right, where everything, we're lined up with our goals and everything in the organization. So we're trying to move from the left to the right. Not to take you back, give you a little bit of flashback, because sometimes, you know, they say if we don't remember where we're coming from, we're bound to repeat. So next one, Doc. Next slide. All right. So what opportunity gaps could have occurred during this time when clearly what you were going through, you had limited growth in academic English? Of course, if you were only doing RELA, and language stagnation occurred, loss due to reduced opportunities as you needed to swirl, speak, write, interact, read, and listen. How much of that could you have really done in that situation? So the gap started to widen there. Key academic language needed to access grade level content. Maybe you're only focusing on reading. So what happened to the others? Um, you had less language support, a lot of variances all over the place, and it is all going to show up as gaps in ELA math and science gains. And of course, you see, we're focusing heavily on the language stagnation. Language stagnation. Because I've heard, we're talking about long-term ELs, loss, decreased support for students and families. Families took a hit. So let's talk about how the shift in the model caused all of that. Let's talk about the opportunity gaps, Doc.
So we are going to take an opportunity to deepen our understanding around these opportunity gaps. And what you will notice when Dr. Thompson spoke, how many times did you see the word language or English represented? Let me take you back. When you look here, you see the word English, English, language, language, language stagnation, Dr. Thompson told us. Worried about language loss, perhaps. So there is some impact around language. How is that helping us to deepen our understanding of these opportunity gaps? We're going to have to pay attention to the language just a bit.
Oh, one moment there, Doc. One
Yes.
moment, everyone. Here is why we really need you to jot these things down, because there's a lot of funding that has come into the school to now support learning loss. When you're asking for funding, we need you to use these terms. You've got to show the need. And in showing the need, you must be able to articulate the opportunity gaps. So I really want you to really deepen your understanding around the losses as you ask for support and funding to address them.
Let us take a deeper dive into what is meant by academic English. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to be using the WIDA ELD standards framework as it is used by 40 states, territories, and federal agencies. It is also used internationally. If you come from a state where the ELPA 21 standards are used, I'm certain that you will be able to draw parallels to tonight's discussion. The WIDA ELD standards framework, together with cross-disciplinary academic content standards and disciplinary practices, defines the language multilingual learners need as they move toward college, career, and civic readiness. For English Language Development Standard 1, we know that English learners communicate for social and instructional purposes within the school setting. For the remaining standards, ELs communicate information, ideas, and concepts needed for success in the core academic subjects. As you see on the screen, WIDA standards 2 through 5 represent respectively the language for language arts, the language for mathematics, the language for science, and the language for social studies. The 5 WIDA ELD standard statements give us a broad conceptual understanding of the integration of content and language. The standard statements show language, how language is used for thinking and doing in the learning process. These standards address the language of schools, the language of schooling, if you will. Now, note that standard 1, language for social and instructional purposes, is cross-cutting. While standard 1 can certainly stand alone, we must be aware that standard 1 is not relegated to students only at the beginning levels of English language proficiency, but it is appropriate for students at all levels of English language proficiency and across a broad range of school settings and across all subjects. Standard 1 also works in conjunction, as you see here, with standards 2 through 5. The 4 key language uses describe the most prominent ways that language is used in schools. So we understand the standards. Now we're thinking about what are the ways that students actually use language in the schoolhouse across all subjects. The key language uses can help provide focus and coherence when educators are working together to integrate content and language instruction. Key language uses share common aspects across subject areas. So allow me to describe each key language use. We narrate. When we narrate, we use language to convey real or imaginary experiences through stories and histories. Narratives serve many purposes, including to instruct, entertain, teach, or support argumentation. When we inform, the key use of inform highlights language to provide factual information. So as students convey information, they define, describe, compare, contrast, they organize, they categorize, or classify concepts, ideas, and phenomena. These things happen in all subjects. The key area of explain highlights language to give an account for how things work or why things happen. As students explain, they substantiate the inner workings of natural, man-made, and social phenomena. And again, explaining happens in all subjects. Finally, the key use of argue. When we argue, we use language to justify claims using evidence and reasoning. Argue can be used to advance or defend an idea or solution, change the audience's point of view, bring about action, or accept a position of evaluation of an issue.
Okay, pause. Question, Doc?
Yes, I'm ready for the question.
Yeah, so how was this impacted during, how does this align to opportunity gaps when we had to make the adjustment and the shift?
So we are, I think the most important distinction to bear in mind is that this needed to be happening through a language lens in reading English language arts and math and science and social studies in all of the core academic disciplines. And we know that COVID made this virtually impossible, even if you had it before COVID. But technically, these are things that students need to do. These key language uses are very common in the college and career readiness standards, and they help frame how we can look at language to teach language and content simultaneously. That is what needs to be happening.
Okay, so teachers, there's lots of funding, especially for after school programs. So here it is, as you formulate your statements, how you are going to articulate for your program to say, hey, we need this, that. This, that Dr. Woodson just shared is one way to talk about how these were limited in all areas. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Now that we understand we talked about the 5 ELD standards. We talked about the 4 key language uses. So now we're ready to examine what we refer to as language expectations. Now, according to WIDA, language expectations set goals for content-driven language learning. They add specificity to the ELD standard statements and key language uses, and make visible the language associated with the content areas. Language expectations are the statements most similar to what educators generally encounter in the academic content standards. Language expectations are goals for content-driven language instruction. Adding specificity to the ELD standard statements. Oh, I'm sorry, and the key language uses. Okay, let me call your attention to 3 aspects of language expectations. There are reference codes, which we're looking at now, the communication modes and language functions, and the language features. Okay, let's delve in with the reference code right now. Now, you will see that the reference code, when you look at the way that the nomenclature works, it starts with a statement of which ELD standard we're talking about. That's to the far left. Okay. And it incorporates an academic content area. So when you look on the screen, clearly we are in the content area of language arts. Obviously, for other reference codes for these language expectations, you would find ELD standard for mathematics, for science and social studies as well. So the ELD in this sentence refers to the ELD standard. Next to the ELD, English Language Development, Language Arts Standards, the 2-3 is your grade level cluster. So in the WIDA framework, you're going to have standards and you're going to have language expectations by grade band. Kindergarten, first grade, grades 2-3, grades 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So those are your language bands. So this is obviously for grade 2-3. The key language use is narrate. We just talked about narrate. And the mode of communication, which I'm going to get to in a moment, is expressive. So when we look at this particular reference code, we can see very clearly how that reference codes incorporates or integrates content and language. Now, let me move forward to our language expectations in the communication mode. So this is the second language expectation in the WIDA framework, the modes of communication or communication modes, whichever way you like to refer to it. We still have the 4 that we're used to. The language domains, we're used to the language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But in this particular graphic, we're also looking at 2 broad modes of communication, which are now referred to as the interpretive mode and the expressive mode. Within the interpretive communication mode, that now encompasses listening and reading as you would expect. But the evolution in the 2020 standards is that we also have in the interpretive mode viewing. And that would be for students perhaps with special needs who need an alternative method other than listening or reading in order to be in the interpretive mode. Likewise, with the expressive communication mode, that encompasses speaking and writing as we may be accustomed to, but it also includes representing, which again helps us to increase accessibility options for students, and it emphasizes multimodal forms of communication and multi forms of being able to represent content. Okay. Now we will return to the third language expectation, which is language functions and features, okay? Language functions are common patterns of language use in the academic content areas that showcase specific ways students might use language to meet the purpose of schooling. So allow me to share this excellent example from WIDA. A series of language functions is associated with the process of constructing fictional narratives, informing peers of newly gained knowledge, explaining phenomena, or engaging in scientific argumentation. Okay. Table 2.2 presents the language functions for, let's practice our reading the code. We just went over the code. So in this example, we've got ELD, language arts, that's the standard we're in, grades 2, 3, right. We're in the key use of narrate, and we are in the expressive mode, okay? It contains 3 language functions that highlight common patterns of language use associated with language arts, as I said, narrative, and grades 2, 3. So here are 3. Orient audience to context, develop the story with time event sequences, complication and resolution, engage and adjust audience. So for this one, we're just going to focus on the second language function, which is developing the story with time and event sequences. In order to carry out particular language functions, language users rely on various language resources, including language features to your right. So the language features would be the types of sentences, the type of sentences that we use, the types of clauses, phrases, and words. Together, the language functions and features create a dynamic and illustrative set that shows some of the ways language works in the service of content learning. The table shown here displays the language features that accompany the second language function from the language expectation ELD language arts standard that you see articulated there. I say all of that to say this, and this is directly from WIDA. This close integration of content and language invites collaboration between content and language educators as they collectively share responsibility for teaching multilingual learners. Language development is its own field of expertise, just as each discipline is. As content and language teachers dive deeper into standards-based planning and delivery of instruction, language specialists, EL teachers, can help content teachers learn more about language functions and features. Similarly, content teachers can help language specialists connect the content to language learning. Now, I know it's a lot on the screen. Let's take a deep breath. But it's really quite simple, and I love it because it's a great way to represent something that's super important.
Yes.
And that would be the proficiency level descriptors. The first thing that I want you to look at is that we are in the communication mode, the interpretive communication mode. So what you're looking at is a proficiency level descriptor for listening, reading, and viewing. Okay, interpretive mode. Across the top, if you look at the criteria in deep purple, you'll see criteria in the first column, and then you'll see across the top in the first row, the levels. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, level 6. So these are the proficiency levels ranging from beginning all the way to the higher levels of proficiency in English. And then for each level, you see very clearly what it is that students can do as they demonstrate proficiency at the end of that level. So you see, for example, in the language area, the language criteria for discourse. Discourse is looking at language at the highest level. When we're looking at the level of discourse, we are above the sentence level, we're at the paragraph level or higher, looking at how students use, how they understand coherence. Can they understand the coherent text, how they're created? Can they understand how ideas are connected across text? Can they understand how ideas are elaborated through text? These are the discourse level of language learning, the discourse level of language. Take
Question,
it down, the
sorry,
sentence level.
question.
Yes, there's a question. Yes.
The how then do we articulate this in terms of learning loss or opportunity gaps?
I think it's going to come. I think they're going to come during the presentation, but I would say this. One of the biggest challenges all of us have had with this entire pandemic is that we've struggled with being able to administer, and this was even before the pandemic. How many of us are really good at administering formative assessments of English language proficiency to determine what proficiency levels our students are in between administrations of the big state mandated tests? So we're good at the summative test administrations, but quite frankly, in many schools across the country, we have not administered a test of English language proficiency aligned to these standards in well over a year. What happens then over the course of COVID, and now we're beginning to recover, how adept are we with understanding what proficiency levels our students are operating at? This resource can be used to help school teams gauge proficiency levels of students. And so that is one of the uses of this particular resource. It will give schools and teams an opportunity to figure out at which proficiency levels the students are operating now versus where they were when they last took a big assessment of English language proficiency. And Dr. Thompson, there may be another question there in the window.
Yes. Is the WIDA model assessment no longer being used for progress data?
So it depends. The WIDA model is a great assessment. That is the most awesome assessment to use because it does give you leading data that is aligned to the summative assessment. WIDA model is the gold standard. That's what you want to use. The fact of the matter is a lot of districts have trouble with the capacity needed to administer that assessment. So if you're running a school, let's say of 500 EL students, it's hard to administer on that scale a leading assessment like the WIDA model. But I believe that it is absolutely the best option to get real leading data to figure out what level the students are operating at now. But again, we may run into capacity issues with that. Okay, and if you haven't been able to administer WIDA model, you're going to have to use something that is aligned to the EL standards that they're being held accountable for. And this would be the next best thing. It gives you an idea of where they're operating.
Right, because when we get back, say for the new school year, there needs to be a baseline.
Oh, yes. And that is really tough. And I know, for example, in the state of Maryland, they delayed testing. They deferred that big time. And so now we don't really have a way to know where they are relative to these WIDA ELD standards, which is what's going to improve academic achievement. If you want those ELA scores up and you want the math scores up and you want to improve their performance in science, you've got to grow their language in those core content areas. So you need a leading English language proficiency assessment that's going to tell you how are the students progressing in those areas of academic English.
Okay, next slide.
The next slide shows you the same thing. It's just broken out for the expressive mode. So here is, for example, a way that we can figure out where the students are relative to speaking, writing, and representing academic English. You see the 3 criteria of academic English. There's discourse level, sentence level, the word or phrase level. And then of course, for each one, you will see a description for each proficiency level. These proficiency level descriptors, according to WIDA, they can be used for collaborating between language development and content area educators. It can be used to support professional learning about language development. A school team can use this to look at the growth of multilingual learners, as I was just explaining. This might also be used for conversations with families um, um,
Yes.
about language growth. So, once again, we have to, oh, I'm sorry. We can also use these to evaluate evidence from student work. You can monitor their progress. There's a lot of use for these proficiency level descriptors. Once again, the gold standard is the WIDA model, but again, lots of districts have trouble with administering that.
Yeah, so this is great because I know that a lot of teachers are wondering, how do we get a baseline? What do we use? We can't wait. We can't go back to the old summative. We just don't know. There's language stagnation. There's nothing for us to use to measure. So therefore, these are excellent. Okay, next slide.
Let's go to the next. And my parting comments, you want to notice that the proficiency level descriptors show 3 language dimensions. So when I had those big pretty purple slides up, you saw the language dimensions, and I think we should just treat them with the level of detail they deserve. The discourse dimension, the sentence dimension, the word phrase dimension. Now, according to WIDA, the discourse dimension imparts overall meaning across the entire text, supported by the sentence and word phrase dimensions. To consider how a language learner constructs a meaningful message, you start by looking at the discourse dimension. You look at the overarching message of the text or the spoken language, and you see how the language is organized to communicate ideas, how language holds ideas together, the cohesion, right? And how loosely or tightly language is packed. That's its density. With the sentence dimension, we are talking about the grammatical complexity of a text. Language users make choices in how they express ideas and their interrelationships through clauses and various sentence types. These also help shape how a text is sequenced and connected. Finally, the word phrase dimension adds precision to communication. For example, we know that language users strategically select everyday, cross-disciplinary, or technical language. They employ multiple meanings and nuances of words and phrases, or they play with shades of meaning. So when we say language, this is what we mean. This is really the meat of what is meant by the academic language.
Right. And what's great about this recording? What's great about this recording is that you can actually use this recording with your teams in your building to help them understand these opportunity gaps. All right, so now we go to outcome 2. Now remember, you looked at the model approaches and you talked about the adjustments that you made. So let's dig a little deeper now into how those adjustments impacted the model that you used, helping to create those learning gaps.
Okay, so let me just set the context a little bit. We understand a little bit about the extent of academic English learners must accomplish to demonstrate college and career readiness, and the imperative to teach language and content together. We understand all that. I just explained all of that. Allow me to share a little bit of context about life in a high EL impact school before COVID-19. You may or may not have been in a school with a high EL impact, which is defined by the Office of English Language Acquisition, that is part of our US Department of Ed in the United States. This is defined as an enrollment of 20% or more of the overall student population. Your EL population may actually be a little larger than you realize when you consider not only the ELs that are currently enrolled in your ESOL program, but also the ELs who refuse services, the ELs who exited the ESOL program. It's likely that your school also could have received Title I funds to provide students. So your EL impact school is probably a little larger than you think it is, because it's a little beyond who's in the EL program. It's probably a high poverty school. You're probably receiving extra Title I money to support students. It's likely that your school, that most of your ELs were Hispanic or Latinx, but we know that you also serve significant numbers of ELs of all racial groups and many different ethnic and linguistic backgrounds from all over the world. Also, when considering the top countries of origin for your ELs, you most likely found that the majority were US born. Yes, many are surprised to learn that. Now, insofar as the ELs who come from outside of the US, many of you are probably serving a rapidly growing population of unaccompanied minors from the Northern Triangle of Central America, most notably Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Many of the students who are coming from these areas speak indigenous languages at home, such as Mam and Quiche. Many of these students and families, as you found out, also needed trauma-informed social emotional supports as they worked through traumatic experiences that served as barriers to learning, such as abuse or violence, sexual assault, or neglect, just to name a few. Now, in light of these demographics and the imperative to ensure that each student was college and career ready, we all understood the need to guarantee that all students had equitable access to grade level curriculum and the academic English they needed to learn to access it so that they can demonstrate what they knew and were able to do. But how many of us actually achieved this before the pandemic? How many of us were accustomed to paying careful attention to the EL program model used in our schools through a school improvement lens? Finally, and most significantly, it could be the case that many of you used a case management approach to serving ELs. And what I mean by that is this is a situation where you have independent or individual ESOL teachers making independent decisions around which EL program model to use, which curriculum to use, which materials to use, how much instructional time to provide for ELD instruction. This common practice is often an unrecognized threat to school improvement efforts as it creates the kind of variance that Dr. Thompson described earlier. You'll remember the arrows all over. Succinctly stated, unchecked variance in a school's EL program model is a significant threat to school improvement efforts and stymies improved academic outcomes for English learners. This means that we need to develop a shared vision for ELD in the school. To start the thinking around what the shared vision could be, we must consider the following essential question. What would it take to ensure that we create equitable conditions for all students to learn grade level content and academic English simultaneously all day, every day? The stool on the left side of your screen shows what it takes to create an equitable school-wide ELD model, which is where all of us ideally should have been before COVID-19. In this model, EL teachers, grade level teachers, special education teachers, and paraeducators engage in the collaboration co-teaching cycle to create the conditions for all students to learn in small, flexible groups to swirl. That is to speak, write, interact, read, and listen to academic English through all academic subjects. The idea of an equitable school-wide ELD model is represented by the back of the chair, as it enables teachers to create the conditions for simultaneous access to academic English and grade level content. This access becomes possible when leaders empower all staff to collaborate in grade level PLCs or communities of practice with a heavy dose of teacher-led professional learning aligned to a school's improvement plan. It is in these PLCs or communities of practice where teams of teachers plan, implement, monitor, and adjust the equitable school-wide ELD model created by the school. This is shown in the first leg of the chair, collaboration in PLCs, and teacher-led PD. The second leg of the chair needed to support this model is daily use of technology for teaching and learning in all subjects, throughout the school day. Using technology effectively promoted a myriad of options and opportunities for English learners to swirl in English and to receive the equitable support needed for learning English and for learning grade level content in RELA, social studies, math, and science. The third and equally important leg of the chair is family engagement. In a high EL impact school, you are most likely accustomed to providing in-person bilingual family engagement workshops, both at the school and in the community, that centered on empowering families to support students academically, right? Perhaps you were using culturally based, trauma-informed family workshops to support newcomer immigrant families in the healing needed to restore the family, eliminate barriers to learning, and increase access to trauma-informed counseling services and other critical resources such as medical care, food, and housing. You are also accustomed to serving families one-on-one at the school to navigate a myriad of school-related needs, such as, but not limited to, completing free and reduced lunch applications, or helping families secure the legal documents to enroll in school. Prior to COVID-19, your students were swirling across the curriculum if you had an equitable school-wide ELD model in place, sustained by deep collaboration among teachers and staff in PLCs, teacher-led professional learning, integration of technology during the school day, and a coordinated family engagement approach, which pulled in critical bilingual trauma-informed counseling supports for students and families. Phew. If these elements were in place, students most certainly demonstrated increases in RELA, math, and English language proficiency scores. Now, when COVID hit last March, we all remember how little time we had to prepare students for the closing of school. The result of this sudden closing is shown on the right. The equitable school-wide ELD model was no longer feasible because it required, in this particular example, small flexible groups of students to rotate to various learning stations to learn grade level content in academic English simultaneously. During COVID-19, the back of the chair fell off and reduced our chair to a stool. The three legs of the stool remained, although each leg was adjusted and intensified to prepare for the shift to virtual learning. The seat of the stool, access to academic English and grade level content had to be completely reimagined. Many of you were thinking, how would we now ensure that all students swirled across the content areas? The pandemic caused a loss in the coherence of the equitable school-wide ELD model, if we were lucky to have one, and variance in our approach to school-wide ELD. The variance to our approach to school-wide ELD returned because the focus shifted to serving students on our caseload as opposed to continuing to create conditions for our students to thrive linguistically in all subjects. The pandemic was a serious threat to school improvement efforts because students no longer had access to the ELD model that created the conditions that enabled them to learn academic English through grade level content. We can all agree that this was quite a burden to bear and that long-standing gaps between ELs and other subgroups of children would be exacerbated.
Mhm. And here's the thing. This is where a lot of EL teachers are frustrated. Because if you're working with an administrative team that does not understand the importance of having um, EL goals in school improvement who do not understand that if children cannot access the content, then their overall scores are going to be impacted. If you have admin teams who do not value what you're doing, it's going to be tough. But we know that schools have gotten a lot of funds for after school programs. So use the language that we're giving you tonight to talk about whether or not the model that you're trying to put back, the back of the stool that you're trying to put back, that went missing when you had to make the adjustments at that time, now require funding. It has got to be an equitable school-wide approach. Equity means that you have given access to all. So whatever it is that they're planning, it must give access to all, to all the EL learners, addressing all the various needs. Those with learning disabilities. And you've got to advocate. You've got to advocate for your program. And we really want this right here for you to use this to put that whole advocacy package together. So when you get the recording, use it, play it over, use the language. And if your admin team is humble enough to say, do not have the knowledge to do this, call on Leading for School Improvement. Call on us, we'll help. We've helped many schools. But that's what I want to reach out and give to you today.
Thank you, Doc. And I just have to say, the chat is outstanding. There's so much good information in the chat. So I just want to remind the participants. Now, bear with us. We do have some information to share. I'm going to take you through these two in a hurry to get you through the rest of the presentation in a timely manner, but the information will be well worth your while. So you definitely want to stick around. So let us talk a little bit about COVID-19 recovery and then this post-COVID world. Schools have been in COVID-19 recovery, you don't need me to tell you, for well over a year. Leaders and teachers have done extraordinary work around the stool of the chair. In the area of collaboration and PD, much of what schools had in place prior to COVID could easily continue, assuming the school improvement plan is EL-centered. That is, focused on the goals and actions essential to implementing a strong content-based ELD program. Educators have found new ways to engage EL families to ensure that they have a voice in planning our new normal. EL educators have been preparing families for their new roles to support virtual learning, caring for their social emotional needs, reaching out to students who are missing and/or are vulnerable. Schools have been supplying and supporting the technology and the tools needed to support our recovery. These tools, which range from instructional television to mobile apps to asynchronous online learning to web-based adaptive curriculum packages to webinars or video lessons to synchronous online learning, to where many of us find ourselves now, the hybrid learning environment. As explained previously, the opportunity gaps caused by the disruption to the equitable school-wide ELD model are significant. For example, students may have experienced fewer opportunities to swirl in all subjects. Yes, students may be practicing speaking, listening, reading, interacting, and writing skills in RELA, but how are these skills being developed in the other core content areas such as math, science, and social studies? Also, monitoring the growth of English language development in a formative way continues to be a challenge, as I explained. Taking in tandem with the disruption to an equitable school-wide ELD model, if you are fortunate enough to have developed one, it is reasonable to conclude that ELs may experience slower growth and attainment of proficiency in academic English. Some students could even experience a bit of language attrition through no fault of their own. Remember, students have been living in their non-English speaking households for months and most likely have had a significant and substantial decrease in exposure to the kind of English that they encountered on a daily basis in school before the pandemic. Without a good foundation in the type of academic English needed to demonstrate college and career readiness standards, it will be impossible to sustain ELs on a positive trajectory to academic achievement over time. We must remember that as proficiency in academic English increases, so does the ability of ELs to demonstrate what they know on high stakes tests. Every test is ultimately an English test. If the English is not improving, neither is the performance on high stakes tests because the students may not have the academic English needed to express what they know and are able to do. At some point in the near future, hopefully, our schools will look like the image on the right, an equitable school-wide ELD model, one that is a perfect fit for your new setting post-COVID, and one that results from an equitable and collaborative approach that involves all teachers and families in closing opportunity gaps.
Yes.
Dr. Thompson.
Let's talk about that post-COVID recovery plan. Because as you advocate, sometimes you have to school your admin if your admin does not have this kind of background. So you have to let them know we are returning to the model we had, or we may have to adjust our model in this way for post-recovery. What approaches are we going to use? Because they do have a lot of funding. They are so funded, I can't even tell you. So as you return to conditions, the conditions must be right. So as you plan ahead, plan in terms of the model, the approach, the class type that is needed to address these opportunity gaps. Think also of conditions that must be in place. And believe me, I cannot see where it is even possible to let go or reduce EL staff at this time when every school has been given so much money, especially for Title III and so on, to recoup. Read the American Rescue Act. It talks about how many millions and billions have been given for English language learners, and all that money is out there in the schools. Okay, next. Oh, all right. Let's talk about a checklist. Here's a checklist we're going to share with you. And then I'm going to go into how to address the family engagement piece. But this checklist, I need you to use this checklist as you guide your school leaders or your district leaders, or you collaborate with them, because there are many out there that know. They know what to do, and they need to work with you collaboratively. All knowledge does not reside with one person. So as you readjust, you have to adjust systems, structures, processes. You have to make sure that you use an equity lens. So how do we make sure that we give access to all demographics, all groups? Because even though they're EL learners, we need you to share with your admin, or admin to share with staff, that even though they're ELs or MLLs, that there are varieties. They come with a variety of needs. So how do we make sure that access is there for them and that teachers are involved? Share the checklist.
So Dr. Thompson, do you want this one?
No, you could go ahead because what I
Okay.
want you to do, what I want you to do for me here, because as I look through the chat, I can see, and also being out in the schools,
Yes. It's
times I
late.
find so. Hmm?
It's getting late too.
Oh, okay. So you could scan them. These are the things that you need to let your school leaders know that you need. Measurement analysis and go ahead, Doc.
Yes, so you're going to get ready to get a nice checklist, get your phone out, there'll be a QR code. And of course, we're going to put some links, but if you want it right away, there'll be a QR code coming up, snap, snap. I know everyone wants to get it, but here's the deal. We have developed a checklist that is organized around organizational leadership and strategic planning and helping us to get back in gear for putting back in place the supports that our students need to be successful in learning that academic English across the curriculum. Now, this particular checklist that you're going to receive is organized around the following leadership categories. So you're going to see information around measurement, analysis, and knowledge management. You'll see some information to help with the leadership piece, information that will help schools with strategic planning, information that may help schools with, processes, understanding key processes, information that'll help with collaboration and co-planning. Good heavens, if we're not collaborating and co-planning already, you are way, way behind the eight ball. You've got to get that in place. It's just non-negotiable. And of course, professional development, family engagement. So here comes the most sought after checklist. Quick, not quick, but go ahead and get your phone out. You're going to snap that QR code, and what it will do is to take you to a school leader's post-COVID-19 checklist to close opportunity gaps. And I do have a pretty good clear picture of the checklist. I'm going to open it up in a moment, but on your screen, I'll talk briefly about how the checklist is organized as you're snapping that QR code. Be sure to, I think it's going to give it to you in view. So you just want to do a make a copy, and then you'll be able to use it as you wish. The school leaders checklist, again, is organized around leadership categories in organizational management, as well as some key elements around family engagement and that EL model. When you see the full checklist, you'll see 3 columns to the left that will allow the school for each item to kind of do a self-assessment. Not yet, I'm not there yet. Maybe you're just beginning in the particular area being noted. Maybe you're just high flying in that area. So that would be the first 3 columns. Not yet, initiating, sustaining. In the middle, you'll see the actual checklist item. And then to the right is a nice column where a school team can check if a particular checklist item has a budgetary impact. So
Okay.
let me take you to.
Pause for a moment, Doc. Because
Yes.
Beverly said she's unable to QR code. Bev, if you put your email address in the chat or something where one of your colleagues can, she said she's not able to.
Okay. Let's see.
Somebody to help Beverly.
Yeah, and for me, it just works on my camera. As soon as I put my camera on, it just opens in my phone. And then I'm able to tap on it and make a copy. So you are going to see that particular resource. And again, you're going to find guiding statements under these key leadership categories that will help a school team get ready or continue our recovery in COVID so that we get to that new space post-COVID where we are ready to teach our students across the curriculum. Now, Dr. Thompson, what I'm going to do for the sake of time, I'm not going to open the actual checklist, but on the screen, our attendees can see the kinds of things that the checklist will ask of schools. And I think one of the things that strikes me most is thinking about, do you have measurable school-wide goals in EL-centered improvement? You got SMART goals? Do you have
That's
action
right.
plans?
They
Anyway,
said that. They talked about that in the, oh, John, Florida, John. Yes, I see. Oh my goodness, this is such a beautiful team. They are putting the link in the chat. You
oh
click,
man, this is an awesome group.
I love this group. Oh my goodness, I would sit with them all
The
day.
chat is amazing. I can't wait to actually digest the chat.
Yep,
And this is
I'm
why we
loving it.
have an interactive learning community. This is beautiful.
Yes, I
Doc,
love this group.
I'm going to shift you now to the family engagement piece.
All right, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. If you use an MTSS multi-tiered system approach to family engagement, you are going to win. Because think about it. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Think about which families would fall into the tier 2 category. Okay, tier 1 is universal support. So when you look at the checklist, that shows family engagement, and it talks about using an electronic platform to enable all staff to engage in multilingual two-way communication with families. That's a tier 1, universal. All families need to get that. When you look at, say, all staff regularly use technology to provide translation and interpretation services, all that is something that is universal. All families get that. Now, when you break down, use this approach, because when you break down what it is that the families should get, the level of support, all families do not need the same level of support. So now, as you look at your family, think about who needs intensive support. So when we look at poverty, which family, and trust me, COVID really illuminated that, which family has a lot more poverty concerns and need that tier 3 support? So poverty would go to the tier 3 support. Trauma, where would you put illiteracy? Say families who came in that had limited schooling, where would you put them? What level of support would they get? And would they get it in a group? If it's in a group, it's a targeted support. If it's more individual, intensive support. At the bottom, I have the limited access to internet. Of course, the universal support should address that equitable approach. Food insecurities, family separation, family reunification, high density housing. The time of COVID, people had to come together, couldn't pay rent. Think about all the supports you have in the school right now. Start looking at your family and start thinking about who belongs in tier 2, who belongs in tier 3. So use the multi-tiered level of support system to arrange family engagement. So you could share your thoughts on that in the chat. Hopefully this is very helpful. Yes. Each family needs to be assessed in its own right. Exactly. And it is the MTSS approach that's going to do it for you. Right. So I turn it over now to Karen. Yes. Karen, you're mute.
Thank you. We have gotten through our webinar together. I want to thank you for hanging in there with us. It's so much information to share, but I think the best thing that I'm enjoying is the chat. It is so rich. And I'm really eager to go through and to learn from all of you as to how it's going out there and what we can do to help. I am leading for school improvement, and both of us offer leadership development options, but LSI, or Leading for School Improvement, we provide asynchronous learning opportunities and in-person professional learning guidance and coaching for school districts and building level teams in high EL impact schools. So, I've got in collaboration with English Learner Portal, there is a self-paced course in this approach to EL Center School Improvement. You can get it for graduate credit. You can get it for CEU credit. It is there. Or we can also provide coaching support, professional learning guidance to school teams for high EL impact schools. So what we do at LSI, you see on the screen, we're all about helping schools and districts, develop and create that shared vision of an equitable school-wide ELD model for your context. No two schools are going to have the same answer to that question. It's going to differ. We help schools parse that out. We help schools create and monitor, implement an EL-centered school improvement plan. We help schools lead to create a culture of collaboration between EL teachers and general ed teachers. We also help cultivate a culture of teacher-led PD and school improvement. It's very powerful. That is something that LSI specializes in. The QR code underneath will take you to the page on the LSI site that gives you more detail about these leadership development options. So feel free to snap that QR code, and it'll take you straight to the leadership development options available from Leading for School Improvement. Dr. Thompson, parent as tutor.
Yes, parents as tutors, we do the same. We support the family engagement wing of it because we understand that parental needs differ. Parents are different. I mean, somebody might be dealing with reunification, while another one is dealing with something totally different. So a one size fits all does not really work for parental engagement. We can't really treat the newcomer parent coming from certain countries the very same way we will treat another set of, they have different needs. They have different needs, and the needs are barriers to learning. You cannot teach a hungry child. You cannot teach a child who is sad. A child who is in a home with a high density family, 14 people in a house. How does that poor baby come to school and need a thing to learn? So we need to look for the supports for them and so on. And then on top of that, parents as tutors, we also encourage after school programs. There are times when we have given materials to families. I know there's a charter school in Philadelphia who uses it, Memphis Charter. We have the reading resources where we teach them how to teach their children. So we have the materials in Spanish for those who speak Spanish only, and we have them also in English.
Excellent. We want to thank everyone for coming out for this webinar. We realize it ran a little long, but the information we hope is dense and rich and will help us plot our next steps as we continue along the road to recovering from COVID-19. You can follow me at KC Woodson 101 at Twitter. I keep everyone updated on what's happening there. Dr. Thompson is also on Twitter at Parents as Tutors. My email website is there. Please make sure that after the webinar closes, you are going to receive a survey. It'll pop right up on your screen. Please do us the favor of providing the feedback on the webinar so that we can continue to improve to meet your needs. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. This is a wonderful group.
Good night.